Good afternoon, everyone. I am Vivek. I had the East India chapter, and today, I am happy to be presenting my fellow editor as a panelist for the webinar that is going to present. The topic is analyzing an academic manuscript, which is something like as academic editors we need to do. We need to analyze the effort that has to go into doing the work and accordingly providing a code to the client. And Murugaraj is going to touch upon the four C's, which is like consistency, coherence, clarity, and correctness, and tie it with the three levels of copy editing, which is like the basic, intermediate, and the substantial. And all of you can put your names and locations in the chat so we know where you are from. It's really great to be able to present this webinar and to see the number of participants increasing. Like we had record registrations till yesterday, it was like 181, and I'm sure we would have crossed 200 today. I see 71 participants who have already joined the session, and we do hope to touch the magic three number mark, which we always strive for. Like we have touched it in the past, and we hope to do it today also and in the future sessions also. So I must tell you something about our trainer for today. Murugaraj, he has been associated with academic publishing since 2004 when he started as a copy editor. And since then, he has trained thousands of copy editors and managed editorial teams across India in different companies. And he has been training copy editors through his own company, Editors Essentials. And he founded Tholga Publishing Services in 2022. And the aim was to help researchers in the successful publication of their work through its editorial services and publishing consulting services. And this webinar today is a result of the collaboration that has happened between Indian Copy Editors Forum, Tholga Publishing Services, and the European Association of Science Editors. And its India chapter, East India, is happy to present this webinar, which which is the first by Murugaraj, but won't be the last. And I think I've taken enough of your time, and I see people have joined and they are settling down. They are putting their name and locations in the chat box. Happy to see people from Croatia, Italy, India, obviously. Dr. Sara has joined from Melbourne, Australia. She has been a regular in our ICF webinars also. Someone has just joined from the UK. So while I look look at the all your messages in the chat box, I hand it over to Murugaraj to start the proceedings.
Greetings, everyone. This is Murugaraj, and I'm really happy to see all of the faces from across the world. A lot of known names and a lot of new names. And thank you for joining us today. And today's session is going to be a session on analyzing academic manuscript, which most of us editors are doing in a regular manner. And the reason that we wanted to come up with this is that we have a lot of discussions about the rates and other things, and one of the components is analyzing an academic manuscript. So we thought it could be a good idea to come out with a session on analyzing an academic manuscript. So let me take you to the presentation straight away. Yes, can someone confirm that my screen is visible?
Yes, all good, very good.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And good. So, as Vivek was mentioning that it's a good number of registrations and people have crossed. I think we are at 80 now. It was a bit nervous for me a couple of days ago because as I was looking at the names of the participants, registrants, a lot of them are already editors. So I was wondering what new I should be or I would be saying. And I know a lot of new editors are also joining us. So this is going to be a mix of editors with varied experiences. So some of you might find some or most or even all of the information that I shared today known already. Some of you might find it new and useful. So in either case, once again, I invite you to this webinar on analyzing an academic manuscript, also called a scholarly manuscript. So basically, the idea came up from observing the kind of discussions, the hot discussions that happen in the ICF forum. So most of you might know what ICF is already, but some of those who do not are not familiar with ICF, ICF is Indian Copyeditors Forum, an informal Facebook group that is very active in India. Of course, we have moved out of, I mean, not moved out, we have extended into WhatsApp also, but hopefully by 2024, we will be a formal organization. But as of now, we are an informal closed group of editors and all sort of people related to the editorial field. And in the forums, primarily on WhatsApp and on Facebook, the one question that keeps getting discussed is this: how much should I charge? Okay, so this is a project I'm going. So this is basically, this may not be a problem if you are doing the same kind of work, but when something comes up new, so what should be done? Okay, how much should I charge? Is the hottest topic that is being discussed. So we extended that idea, and when we looked up the internet, we find a lot of resources on how much to charge. Okay, and a lot of inputs from people about how to charge, whether it should be based on number of words, based on number of pages, based on the number of hours, and what are the various factors that one should consider while pricing the project. Okay, I can immediately think of Louis Arnby's work on pricing fiction work. Okay, and I wanted to emphasize that this is more of an academic work. So, and even in the Indian scenario, we have Anupam and Michelle working on this regularly. Anupam has written a couple of articles about how to price it. In fact, Michelle has created an Excel workbook that has all the columns one should be thinking about while pricing a project, while estimating the cost of a project. So you input all the necessary information and it will give you some indication as to what could be the best price for the project. In fact, what I loved about Anupam's follow post is that he shared some of the inputs that he created for writing his article on how to cost your project, how to estimate the cost of your project, wherein he talked about all the, how the senses, the 5 senses approach, as he calls it. Okay, but he goes on beyond the 5 senses and the other factors that influence our daily lives, and how as a business owner, many of us are freelancers, many of us are independent editors. So we are more like business owners, and how we should consider all of these things before we consider the price of a project. So in considering all of these discussions on estimating the cost of a project, most of these articles, most of these discussions have some mention about how to analyze a manuscript, but as they call in the scholarly manuscript world, to the best of the author's knowledge, this one, how much can I edit in a particular hour? Okay, because I believe that there is a strong relationship between how much can I edit in a particular time. Let's say 1 hour, a standard unit as we normally have. So how much can I edit in 1 hour? And how much should I charge for that? So those two are the two interrelated questions. So it all depends on how much I want, and also it depends on how much I can edit. Okay, so we all know that there are different levels of editing, and the number of pages or words that we edit in an hour vary drastically between these different levels. Okay, so how much can I edit is going to be the central question of this webinar. So in turn, this question means, how do I find how much I can edit? So that is through or by the way of doing some sample editing. Okay, so we will move on to the question of what I mean when I say manuscript analysis, because manuscript analysis could mean two different things. One is the quantitative analysis. When I say quantitative analysis, what I mean is that, okay, just checking that the manuscript is available in its entirety. All the figures are available, all the tables are there, chapters are not missing. So in fact, the simplest form is that you have everything in front of you to start editing. Okay, so that part is not what we are interested in now. I'm sure this is obvious, but I just wanted to make sure that this is explicitly mentioned. Rather, what we are trying to talk about today is the qualitative analysis to estimate the efforts and the cost of a project, a new project. Okay, so why is this qualitative manuscript analysis important? You can be a freelancer or you can be an in-house editor. For a freelancer, it is important because you need to put a price tag on the time that you spend on a project. Okay, so this way you should be able to put a fair price for all your efforts on a project. So it is not just for freelancers, it is also needed for in-house editors, because in-house editor, the environment, the atmosphere is, the landscape is completely different because there's a chain of command there. Okay, from the author, the project manager, the production editor, and then the in-house copy editing team. So there is a chain of command here, and the instructions are very clear, unlike in a relationship directly with an author, between an author and an editor. The other side of this industry, and I am bringing this because India is a hub of academic outsourcing publishing. Many companies are there. In fact, it provides direct employment to nearly 25 to 30,000 people in India. In fact, the upcoming book from the Indian Copyeditors Forum, Copy Editing, A Closer Look, specifically talks about this one. So how India is, or why India is a leader in academic publishing outsourcing, among other things. So it is very important for in-house editors also to validate this, because when we are working directly with an author, the authors may not really understand the different terminologies that are used in editing, line editing, say language editing, style editing, or level 1 editing, level 2 editing, and all of these things. Sometimes they may even tell you to proofread their manuscript, but what they meant actually was rewrite the entire manuscript, okay, because it is needed there. So the terminologies are just used very casually there. It is very important for the freelancer to establish the right kind of expectations with the author. So by doing the sample editing, the freelancer is able to provide a glimpse of what the author is going to expect, what the author can expect at the end of the editing process. So the author doesn't have different expectations, may not end up in getting a disappointment at the end of, oh, I thought this, but you have done it this way. At the same time, it is also providing enough input for the freelancer to estimate the number of hours required, number of days required, and the charges that the freelancer is going to charge the author. For the in-house editors, the instructions are pretty clear and straightforward, because there is another set of people there in the publishing house who looks at the manuscript, and decide what kind of or what level of editing is required. So it comes to the editorial team with a note that it requires a level 2 editing, level 3 editing, or a light editing. But it is always not exactly the, okay, I'll put it that way. So sometimes it goes wrong. Okay, the instructions that comes to the editorial team could be different in the sense that the expectation outlined in the style sheet, outlined in the project brief, could be different from what is actually needed. So the editorial team may end up doing a higher level of intervention than it is expected. Probably the project brief says light editing, but the manuscript may really need a substantive level of editing. So it is very important for the editorial team to alert the project management or the publishing house even before starting the manuscript, start editing the manuscript, and ensure that the right kind of editing level is, changed. So for both freelancers and the in-house editors, it is very important to do a manuscript analysis before starting the editing process. So in this background, so what is that analysis we are talking about? The qualitative analysis we are talking about is going to talk about, is bring together two aspects of the definition of the different levels of copy editing based on these 4 C's. Okay, so the first one is C1 is correctness, and C2 is consistency, clarity, and coherence. For all our practical purposes today, discussions today, I'm going to bring together clarity and coherence together as C3 and C4 as one entity. So we will be talking about 3 things: correctness, consistency, clarity, and coherence. So under correctness, we can think of bringing all things that follow rules and exceptions, okay, like verb agreement, article usage, spelling, okay, and punctuation errors, serial commas, all of these. The next part is consistency, where we can think of all the things that we standardize. The most common example, the most obvious example would be standardizing spelling, English variations rather. So American English, British English, Canadian, Australian, or New Zealand. Okay, these are the most common major variations. And stuff like single quotes or double quotes, N dashes or M dashes, even like, words like focused with a single S or a double S. So all of the things, they are not actually errors, but we standardize them. And clarity and coherence is all about the sentence and meaning, the context level changes. Okay, the sentences are complete in terms of the syntax, in terms of the meaning. Is it clear without any ambiguity? Okay, so all of these things are grouped under clarity and coherence. And of course, these are all not, completely mutually exclusive areas. For example, correctness and consistency could overlap at some places. Okay, because the content is a king, right? So you need to understand what the author's intended message is and make changes accordingly. So it's not simply following rules. I'm sure all of us agree to this, but I just wanted to make it a point. Okay, so it is very important to understand that these are all not mutually exclusive groups of changes, but overlapping changes. And then we talk about the 3 different levels. Okay, the light editing, medium level of editing, substantive level of editing. Sometimes they call it basic, standard, heavy editing, L1, L2, L3. So the terminologies differ between different publishing houses, different people. But we can all agree on that. So there are 3 different levels. Okay, the light, medium, and substantive. And sometimes there is a 4th level which creeps in between as 2.5 level, 1.5 also. But again, so let us agree that there are 3 major variations: light, medium, and substantive. So bringing these together, these 2 concepts together, the 4 C's of copy editing and the 3 levels of copy editing. So this is what we get when we try to bring them together. Okay, so if we consider the green stripe as the changes related to correctness, basic errors, straightforward errors that are based on rules and exceptions. And C2 is all about consistency, the green stripe that covers all the changes that are made, not because they are wrong, but because that's how we prefer it. The style related changes, the consistency related changes. Okay, and then the third part is coherence and clarity brought together. And this is all about sentence level changes, paragraph level changes, even section level changes, wherein we focus on the context and see whether the sentences make sense. There is no gap between sentences or discussion, and all the changes related at the higher level, the macro perspective, if you can call it. So C3 and C4 is about the macro perspective. C1 and C2 is all about the micro perspective. So we have these two triangles here, and then there is one, what we call a trapezoid, possibly. Okay, so the one triangle on the left is what we define as the L1 area. Okay, the light editing or the basic editing area. Okay, so under this, we can see that the blue stripe occupies the majority area. Okay, and the red part is relatively small. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that the manuscript is usually well written, and there is very little need for changes related to clarity and coherence. Mostly this is because of the author's focus is more on writing process. Okay, so the brain processes much faster than the hand processes. It could be writing or typing. Okay, so the brain processes it much faster, and there is a gap between thinking and the writing, so there could be errors because of that. There could also be errors because of what we call the curse of knowledge. Okay, so let's say an author is writing, it's not, let's say the authors write about their own specialties, right? And even if there are gaps in their writing, they do not recognize that because their mind already knows answers to these problems. Okay, the gaps are already filled in by their existing knowledge. So when an author reads the same manuscript twice or even thrice, they may not really find that there is a problem, there is a discontinuity, there is a jump, there is an ambiguity, because they read it the way they would expect it to. They expect the reader to read it. But when somebody else reads it, especially an editor, when an editor reads the manuscript, she is able to pick up all of these problems, the jumps, the cuts. Okay, so the discontinuities, all of those are obvious to the editor with a fresh perspective, and they are identified to the author for corrections. So these errors, the small red triangle at the top, are not because the author doesn't know, but because of these problems related to writing and also the curse of knowledge. And I also wanted to clarify that the small triangle doesn't mean that it is not the focus. Rather, it relates the different sizes of these, the green, blue, and the red stripes indicate the kind of focus that is needed for the manuscript. Okay, you would be doing a lot of basic changes related to correctness and consistency with little to no changes in clarity and coherence. Let us take the other case, the inverted triangle on the right hand side, wherein the red part is predominant, which means that the editor has to spend a lot of time in ensuring clarity and coherence of the manuscript. So you might be wondering, okay, if the author has problems in presenting itself, in writing the manuscript itself, there may be little possibility that the other errors are very low. Once again, the point is that it is not a number, it is not a percentage of how much, but it is rather the focus is more on coherence and clarity. Okay, and the C1 errors on a relative comparison is less. On the other hand, we have L2 in between, which is a balanced, a balanced manuscript where the author leaves all type of errors in an almost equal manner. Okay, so L1, L2, and L3 can be defined as this combination of C1, C2, C3, and C4. So this also warrants another perspective. Okay, so when an editor edits, okay, the usual recommendation, I think most of the experienced editors will agree that a two-pass editing could be a good idea. I think most of us follow that already, especially when you move towards the L2, L3 editing. Two passes may not even be sufficient. Okay, you may have to go for level 3 because every time you refine the manuscript, the errors, the underlying errors become more and more obvious. So we may have to go for another round, maybe another round. But in general, 2 rounds of editing is sufficient in general. Okay, and again, this could vary between manuscripts, but this is general idea. So the first round of editing focuses on the top tier, the C3 and C4, focusing on clarity and coherence. Clarity and coherence. And the second round focusing on correctness and consistency. This is some might think that okay, let's do C1, C2 first, and then C through C4. Why not this way? Okay. So basically, it's C3 and C4 is recommended first because we will be focusing more on the contextual changes, and once make all the large level changes, which warrants major track change version. So the changes to the manuscript. So by the time we complete that, many of the C1, C2 errors could have been taken care of. But at the same time, when you go after, because when you make a change, the editor could have inadvertently introduced some errors there. So doing the C1, C2 errors changes at the later part would be really helpful because we'll be able to weed out those things at a later stage. So I'm talking about these 2 different rounds also because that is also going to matter now. So having defined the 3 levels of editing, level 1, level 2, and level 3, against these 4 different expectations, C1, C2, and C3, and C4. Now let us move on to editing the sample. Okay. Again, there could be different ways of doing it. I'm sure editing a sample is not a completely novel, revolutionary idea that I am proposing. Almost all of us, all of us are doing this already. So this editing the sample is something, this is how I normally do it, and I recommended this to my editorial teams, and this worked favorably for us. So I'm sharing this a 4-step sample editing process. Okay, so the first step is to choose a passage of 1000 to 1500 words. And something interesting happens when you work with authors directly, because authors are really hesitant to share the entire manuscript before they commit to us. Okay, so sometimes we say, okay, we will sign all the NDA and other things, but still the authors would be hesitant to share the entire manuscript with us. So sometimes we tell them, okay, just send out a random passage of 1000 to 1500 words. I specifically tell them not to share anything from the abstract or the introduction. Okay, anything randomly from the middle pages, the in between. Or if you are working on as an in-house editor, the project is already with you, so you can take any random passage in between. Okay, if it is chapters, just find out a section that has around 5 to 6 pages. 1500 words is a maximum of 6 pages. So 4 to 6 pages a section. That could be really helpful because a section is logically bounded in the sense that it discusses one simple idea. So a section is also another great place to understand how the author has been able to connect the different ideas. Okay, so choosing the passage is the first part, and then set the timer and edit, focusing on C3 and C4. As I said earlier, my recommendation is to start with the C3 and C4, the coherence and clarity related changes, reading the manuscript for sentences that are incomplete or ambiguous jumps in the discussion. Sometimes the author goes back and forth. Okay, linearity is not always a possibility, but sometimes the author goes back and forth so many times that it is very difficult to track. So is there a way you can just make it or present it in a more linear manner so that the meaning is easily followed? Ultimately, the reader should be able to understand the manuscript in the first pass of reading. That's what I would always say. The copy editor's goal is to ensure that the reader understands the manuscript, understands the author's intended message, rather, without rereading it. Okay, so the copy editor should strive for that one round of reading. The reader should understand. Okay, so C3 and C4 changes are done first, and then reset the timer, do the C1, C2 changes. Okay, so all the basic errors, standardization of spelling and consistency related changes. So all of these things. So now we have 2 rounds, 2 layers of editing. Put them together. Let's say there are 1,500 words in the sample and we complete it in X number of hours. Okay, but we have done 2 rounds. So let us take an average and identify the level needed. So we can see that if there are a lot of changes in the first round, it means that it needs a level 2 or a level 3 editing, because substantive editing possibly. If the time taken for the second step here, focusing on C3 and C4, it is much less than the time taken for C1 and C2 related changes, then obviously the manuscript is usually well written. There are there is nothing much to worry about in terms of coherence and clarity. So the level required could be L1 or L2, something like that. Okay, so by doing at the end of the sample editing process, we are able to identify, we are able to calculate the average number of words I can edit per hour. Let's say 1,500 words. I completed the second step in 75 minutes, 1 hour 15 minutes, and the third step in another 30 minutes. Okay, so 1 hour 45 minutes for 1,500 words 2 times. So divide it by half, make it half. That will give the average time required for us to complete the entire editing process. So we have calculated the average number of words that we can edit per hour for this project, and also we have identified the level that is needed for this project. Now, having done both of these points, it is also important for us to have this benchmark set already. Okay, this benchmark should not be based on anybody else's experience. It is like investing in the market, right? You don't invest simply because your friend has done it, your relatives have done it. It is because you have to invest only based on your own analysis, right? The same holds true for this benchmark setting also. So this is not about industry standard. This is not about how everybody else in the team works, but this is more for the individual. This is based on our own experience. So it is, you can do this by noting down the time that you take for editing as a regular process to measure your efficiency. So based on that experience, you can define these things. I define these 4 levels. Okay, the first one is proofreading, wherein everything else is done. It is very, very little intervention is needed. The L1, L2, L3 things that we have already defined. So L3 warrants a higher level of intervention, which means the average number of pages or words that you do in an hour is going to come down maybe drastically. On the other hand, the proofreading, you will be able to do it much, much faster than an L3 level of editing. Okay, so let's say this is the empirical, based on the experience, my empirical data, I have set my own benchmarks. Okay, so this is an example. This could be different for you. I mean, I suggest that if you have not done this already, you do this. Next time you start editing, you start marking the time and the number of words that you have edited, and the level of editing that you are doing. Okay, and keep tracking this for a period of time, and come out with these benchmarks. So the benchmark has to be done by yourself for the work that you do. Okay, so let's assume that you are doing 2,500 words per hour, and you are charging 1 scarab per word. And that's an interesting point that I wanted to include here, because the symbol that you see here, right, like a beetle, that like an insect, right? So that all of us would have seen it in MS Word tables, denoting the end of cells, right? And it is also a symbol for currency, because as I was working on this, presentation, I was momentarily confused between which currency to include. Dollar is a universal currency. We are doing this session for ease, which is primarily from the UK. So pound could be a good idea. Nearly 50% of the registrations are from India. So rupee could be another good idea. So I was, juggling between these different choices, or should it be euro? Okay, so all of these choices, and I was thinking, okay, is there a common symbol to indicate currency rather than just going by specific currencies like dollar or rupiah, all of these things? And interestingly, I found that this symbol, the end of cell markers that we have seen frequently in MS Word, is called scarab, which is basically a beetle, the insect, and it is a common, it's a symbol for undesignated currency, so we are using it here. So 2,500 words per hour at the rate of 1 scarab per word, and my price would be 2,500. Obvious math, right? 2,500 into 1 is 2,500 scarab. On the other hand, L1 I might have done, because it's empirical data, so it's all about past. So 2,000 words per hour, I have been able to do 2,000 words per hour at 1.5 scarab per word. So my charges are going to be 3,000 scarab, and so on and so forth. Obviously, as we move on from proofreading to L3, the number of words that we edit in an hour is certainly going to come down. And at the same time, this is also about skill, right? So there is a large mass of editors who can do proofreading, but there would be a very small team of editors who can do a level 3 substantive level of editing, especially in a particular subject. Because as you move from proofreading to L3, your subject matter expertise is also very important. Okay, so the L3 should also consider that expertise, the SME expertise that you have. So that's why it is not simply all 4 levels, you should have same 3,000 scarabs or 2,500 scarabs. This should also be incorporated into fixing your price, the skill that you are bringing in, the expertise and the knowledge that you are bringing into the editing process. That is also very important. So L3, even though I'm able to edit only 1,000 words per hour, I'm going to charge 4 scarabs per word, which means the per hour charge for me would be 4,000 scarabs, not simply an equivalent of 2,500 scarabs that I can get from proofreading. So it is not simply a substitute of one for the other. The more skills that you require, the more charges, the more pay we should be demanding. So this benchmark should have been there already with you. As I said earlier, if you haven't done this before, I strongly recommend that you start making a note of this. So maybe by another 1 month or 2 months, you will have some data to calculate your hourly charges. So now that you have defined your benchmarks, you have also completed the editing sample by choosing a passage of 1,000 to 1,500 words, doing 2 rounds of editing. The first round focusing on C3 and C4, and the second round focusing on C1 and C2, calculating the average number of words that you edit per hour and the level of editing required. Now we make a comparison. So that's the last part of it. So until this, the sample edit, until the sample editing part or analysis of manuscript is covered. So we are going to do some finishing touches here. And the next part is doing the estimate. Okay. So let's say that based on the sample that I have edited, I find that this manuscript requires a level 2, L2 level of editing. And the words I edited in 1 hour is 1250. Okay. But according to my benchmark data, my L2 is 1500 words per hour at the rate of 2.25 scarabs per word. Okay. So 1500 words per hour is my L2 benchmark. However, when I did the sample, I noticed that I calculated that I can edit only 1250 words. So there is already a short of 250 words, which should be primarily accounted for in our conversion. So now we are going to do the estimate by converting our sample editing data against the benchmark data, or comparing it against the benchmark data. Okay. So coming back, the editing level required is L2, and the words edited in 1 hour for the sample is 1250. On the other hand, my benchmark fee for level 2 editing is 3375 scarabs at the rate of 2.25 scarabs per word. Okay. Now, if I apply the same 2.25 scarabs per word for the 1250 words that I edited for this number, I would be getting a lower benchmark fee. I would be getting a payment that is lower than my benchmark fee, because 2.25 into 1250 would be somewhere around 3,200 or 3,250. So we do some calculations to ensure that this benchmark fee is reached. Benchmark is a basic minimum, right? So we need to ensure that the conversion takes care of that, ensures that that benchmark fee is reached. So how do we do that? We divide the benchmark fee for 1 hour, 3,375, by the number of words that we edited, which is 1250, which leads us to this number, 2.70 scarabs per word. 3,375 divided by 1250. So this is going to be my minimum rate for this particular project. Because we all know that every project is different, is unique in terms of the writing process. So I cannot have a fixed number and then say, okay, L2, I'm going to charge 2.25 scarabs per word. This L3, I'm going to charge 4 scarabs per word. No. It should consider the number of hours that is required for the same level of work. Okay. So if I were to edit 1500 page words, which is my standard, my benchmark, I need to add another 15 minutes of work to this project, to this particular project, because I was able to edit only 1250. So another 15 minutes need to be added for this project, which means I have to incorporate that price into my benchmark. Okay, so my minimum rate would be two scarabs, 70 let's say pies per word for this particular. Okay, so this is what we should be. This is my recommendation for that. So basically, this part is just doing the completion. So primarily, what we wanted to talk about is this. Okay, prepare your benchmark rates and revise it every 6 months or so. Edit a sample. So editing a sample is a 4-step process. We choose a sample passage. It could be randomly given by the author, or you could randomly choose it from anywhere in the manuscript, not from the beginning of the manuscript, especially not abstract or the introduction. Okay. I mean, it's obvious reasons, right? So many times the authors give it to their friends who write well to write the abstract, or sometimes the introduction also, because they believe that the first impression is very important. So based on the quality of abstract and introduction itself, an article will get accepted for publication, which is not true. Okay, so leave those parts and take any random sample passage from the rest of the manuscript. Do the first level of editing, focusing on C3 and C4, and the second round of editing, focusing on C1 and C2. Calculate the average number of words and also identify the level of editing required. And let's compare it with the benchmark and calculate the per word cost for this particular project. So this has helped us in identifying the level required and also this serves both purposes. Okay, so it is not only about analyzing manuscript. This analysis leads us to find the right price for for charging for this particular manuscript. Sorry. Okay, so with this, I'm going to stop here for questions. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Murugaraj. That was a very insightful session, and we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I will uh, read it out. So
Yes, Vivek.
Lorenzo Fusini is asking, do you charge for large editing sample if you take a sample that's more than 1,000 words?
Yes, in fact, the sample should not be more than 1,000 to 1,500. 1,500 is the extreme. Okay, so my samples are always around 1,000 words. 1,000 words is the maximum that I do. Even a couple of days ago, one of my team members, a freelance editor, asked whether she can do a 17-page sample. That's what she was asked for. Okay, a 17-page sample of level 2 editing. So my recommendation is that, okay, I wouldn't say whether you should do it or shouldn't do it, but then this is too much of an ask. So anything beyond 5 pages, especially when it is in its entirety, like an entire manuscript or a chapter, we should demand for that sample. Even though it is rare, there is a possibility that different pieces, different chapters of a manuscript is given to different people and then they are collated. I mean, of course, that's unethical and this could lead to quality problems, inconsistent editing, and all of these things at a later stage. But again, this is a possibility. So any sample should not take more than 1 hour of your time, and anything that takes more than that, you should be compensated for that.
Okay, thanks, Murugaraj. There is a follow-up question
Yes.
From Lorenzo. Do you deliver the edited sample back to the client so they can know whether they like the work that you have done?
Yes, of course. As I mentioned earlier in the session, doing the sample serves two purposes. Okay, one is when we share that editing sample with the author, we are telling this is what we are going to do to your manuscript. The author may sometimes be expecting more, and so by showing the changes, by sharing the sample with them, we are going to prepare them. Okay, don't expect, the manuscript is probably already well written. You don't really need a higher level of editing. Or sometimes the author thinks that, because this is very common. The second possibility I'm about to explain is very common, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities in India, where the different levels of editing is not known. I think this is universal issue. This is an universal issue. People do not really understand the difference between proofreading, level 1 editing, level 2 editing, substantive editing, all of these things. I think there is no consensus even among the editing fraternity about what includes which. So they simply say proofreading. So by taking their intersection on their face and do the proofreading, they would be expecting a much higher level of intervention, but we would be providing very little. So sharing that sample with the author helps us establish the right kind of expectations for the author, and also helps you estimate the fair price for your work. So yes, to simply answer your question, yes.
Aisha Chari has again a follow-up kind of query. if you revise your benchmark every 6 months, how do you go
Ah,
about informing your regular and new clients about the changes to your fees?
I think as long as you don't publish your price on your website, there shouldn't be a problem, except for the regular clients. Okay, if you're new clients, there is no problem because they're just going to know about your rates for the first time. If they are your existing, especially regular clients, yes, you may have to. I think a good idea might be when you start your relationship with the client, you can tell them that every 6 months or 1 year, my rates could be revised, and it is based on the see. There are two things happening. Okay, the reason behind the suggestion that you should revise it 6 months or so. 1 year is a maximum period. 6 months is a ideal period. The reason is that we editors learn regularly. Okay, I think I'm sure each of us here would have come across this quote somewhere. If we charge X number of scarabs per word, it is not because I'm spending only 10 minutes or 15 minutes on the manuscript, because I have spent 10 years learning what to do in those 10 or 15 minutes. So that the constant learning that an editor undergoes, that should also be incorporated into our pricing. That's a strategy. Okay. So as long as it is not drastic, your existing clients will certainly not object. But at the same time, this also is going to give them an advantage because you are going to edit it possibly faster. Okay. When you consider the cost of the entire project, there would be little variation, is what I mean here. Did I make myself clear there, Aisha?
Aisha, you can unmute and let us know whether your answer has been, question has been answered to your satisfaction.
For the executives, for the people in full-time roles in companies, not just about editors, anybody for that matter, there is periodical revisions, right? Every year they get some revisions, whether it is peanuts, whether it is great paychecks, that's a different question. So there is a revision every year, and the economy revises upwards. There is no one single year in the entire world economy where prices are going down year on year, right? So when things are like this, when prices increase and the paychecks increase for others, why not for editors?
Yes, Murugaraj, you have made a very valid point, and I hope freelance editors will make note of it. The next question is, don't clients want to know the charges at the outset, even before they share the manuscript with the editor? And doesn't this
Yes,
create a chicken and egg situation? How do you
yes,
handle it?
that happens. That happens. In fact, I have quite a few people who move to other editors because I was not willing to rather give them a quote, because they came with the simple question, how much would you charge? Okay. So it's like going to a hotel and asking, what will you give me? Right? Unless the other person knows how much you have to pay. So in our case, how much or how good or how worse is a manuscript? All right. So what kind of efforts is needed? So I try to explain. Okay, I explain that there is no fixed pay because editing is not something that is fixed, that's not etched on stone. Different papers require different levels of editing. So I try to explain all the things that are behind this and tell them that after this, sample editing of 2-3 pages or maybe 4 pages, I'll be able to show you both the kind of changes that I make and the estimate cost for the project also. So sometimes, most of the times, people understand. They also are rational. Okay, so they agree to it. But there are few cases where people were not happy that they are not getting a quote straight away, and they just disappeared. Okay, I'm okay with it. Okay.
Yeah, you are right. Like editing is not something that has MRP printed on it.
Exactly.
It's not a product, it's a service. And
Yes.
Arun Srinivasan, his query is some books, especially contributed ones, may have a few well-written chapters and some that are not. So how do you average it?
Yes, this happens especially in the editorial production floor when we work with companies. So it comes with a it says level 2 for the entire book, and there are a few chapters that are really well written, and there are a few chapters that are poorly written. Okay, so that's how we categorize. Most of us from the uh, you know publishing outsourcing companies, we understand this already. So there are a couple of pointers that we normally consider. Okay, so maybe discriminatory, but we also look at the nationality of the author. But we understand that just looking at the nationality of the author could be deceptive because for obvious reasons. Okay, and as much as possible, we do some 10 to 15% of the entire book as sample. Okay, and this is with the assumption that, as I said earlier, this is mostly on the production floor for the outsourcing companies, publishing outsourcing companies, that the book is already awarded to you. Okay, so you are going to estimate whether the awarded rate and the level match with the expected rate and the level. So that's what you are doing. So there is some space for us to do higher percentage of the sample. That's possible. Frankly, I haven't received any multi-authored books for me as a freelancer, so I really haven't thought about it. Sorry.
Okay, I don't have any more questions in the Q&A, but I saw one question
There's one
somewhere.
more question, I think.
There was something in the chat box.
Yeah, Yatindra asked 4 per word for what. So I use the common, scarab as a term for money. Okay, so it could mean anything: dollar, rupee, euro, anything that you like. Okay. Yes, Preeta says identifying the level of editing a project needs and calculating the fee is a challenging part of work, but it is an important aspect, as you would agree. Yes. Do you find that the authors overestimate the quality of their documents and are unwilling to accept that the level of editing is level 3? They believe that very little editing is necessary and also do not want to pay much. There are two aspects to it. Carlin Bennett. Yes, that's a good question. There are two aspects to it. One is recognizing the actual level of their writing. Okay. And the second part is how much they are willing to pay. Okay. So the sharing a sample, okay, the sample edit passage, 4 to 6 pages with the author gives them, by sharing it, we are able to give them clarity as to how much editing is needed, how much intervention is needed. So even if the author believes that it is well written and doesn't require a higher level of intervention, we are able to show them that it is needed. So we may also include the reasons as to some of the changes. I think most of us will do that. So we can explain to them why this change is needed. By doing this, we'll be able to educate them about the level of editing required. And the second part, if they are rational, they would accept revision, upward revision of the project fee. And otherwise, we may have to let the author go.
Thanks, Murugaraj, for a great presentation. The questions will not stop, but we have a restriction of time, and I thank all the participants who stayed for the entire session. We touched 91 and it was fluctuating between 88 and 91. So I will take it that some people left, some people joined, and we would have touched 100. And yesterday, like we discussed that 50% of those who register, they attend. So that came true. And thanks, Mary. And the queries that remain unanswered, we will try to answer those through email. And once again, thanks, Murugaraj, and thanks to all the participants, and thanks to all our international attendees. It was great having you here, and we will see you next month. And there are other sessions about which Mary has already shared information in the chat box. So do register for those. Have a nice day.
Thank you.